Hey guys, this is the second part in the series on business structures in Singapore. Today we are going to talk about private limited companies, in other words, companies limited by shares. In my view, this is the best business structure because of the limited liability of the shareholders and directors. A private limited company is a separate legal entity from its owners. It's separate, okay? The company itself is an entity, it's allowed to own property, it's allowed to enter into contracts, it can be sued, and it can sue, okay? It has nothing to do with the shareholders or the directors below, okay? Now, let's talk about the advantages of the private limited companies limited by shares. The directors and shareholders are not liable for the debts or losses unless they set up the company to commit fraud. Secondly, the directors and the shareholders will also not be liable unless they set up the company for the main purposes of committing fraud. The third advantage, profits of a private limited company are taxed at corporate tax rates, which are quite low in Singapore. And dividends are tax-free in the hands of shareholders. Number 4, tax relief. For newly incorporated companies, the first $100,000 of chargeable income are tax-free for the first 3 consecutive years of assessment. What is the other benefit? Well, the ownership of a private limited company is easily transferable. You can just do a simple transfer of shares to the buyer and voila, he becomes the new owner of the company. Also, additional shareholders can be appointed as investors. So if the company is doing well and people want to invest, the company can issue new shares to new shareholders, or alternatively the original shareholder can sell his existing shares. Now, what are the disadvantages of private limited companies? Well, the first would be stringent compliance. There are filing of accounts, there are annual general meetings, there will be extraordinary general meetings. The accounts have to be audited, okay, unless the revenue is less than 10 million, in which case the company is exempt from the audit requirements. The private limited companies are governed under the Companies Act, okay. There are many rules and regulations under the Companies Act. And any breach of these rules and regulations under the Companies Act will attract financial or even prison penalties. The third disadvantage of private limited companies, is the high cost in maintaining them, because you have to hire an accountant, you have to hire a corporate secretary to file your annual returns, directors' reports that are required under the Companies Act. Companies are also more expensive to set up. The typical setup costs for incorporating a company would be about 1,000 Singapore dollars, and you have to pay your corporate secretarial firm about $600 a year to do all your corporate secretarial matters, such as holding annual general meetings, passing board resolutions, directors' resolutions, issuance of dividends. What are the requirements for a private limited company in Singapore? Well, there has to be at least one resident director. Resident means either a Singapore citizen or a permanent resident who resides in Singapore. If, for example, if you live overseas and you wish to set up a company in Singapore, but you do not live here, you want to be a director but you do not live here, you can always appoint what is called a nominee director. You pay about $2,000 or $3,000 to be a nominee, the local resident director. You will also have to appoint a secretary. What is a secretary? A company secretary is an officer of the company who shares legal responsibilities with the directors, okay, for certain tasks required under the Companies Act. The company secretary is responsible for the efficient administration of the company, especially with regard to ensuring compliance with the Companies Act, and ensures that the decisions of the board are implemented. So thanks for watching this video on private limited companies.